Sad to say, with the assassination of Charlie Kirk as he was speaking in a campus event yesterday, the United States has made one more step in its relentless downward spiral into the darkest of places. So while the various people close to this are doing the various things that people do, let us take a step back and look at this human tragedy in the context of the process that the country is undergoing. Because this was both predictable and indeed predicted. Not in relation to Kirk specifically, of course, but one of the factors that comes with both the relentless progress to civil war and or the descent into genuine oppressive authoritarian rule is the normalization of political violence. Now, in a healthy democracy, such violence should not happen at all. But, of course, societies are large and complex, and aberrations take place in the best of systems, so fine, maybe it happens. But it should be rare, and when it happens at all sides of a political divide condemn it as alien to the system, not compatible with the expectations and standards of the country. And that's because in a healthy democracy, elected politicians of all shades have more in common than they have dividing them. They are all committed to nurturing the health of the democratic system itself. They know that if that system fails, then their position becomes untenable, the service they deliver for the country becomes impossible. And they all have a sense, whether from intuition or a knowledge of history, that democracies are fragile. They have to be supported and nurtured and defended because they can easily collapse. This is why you do not vote for candidates who refuse to accept the results of elections. That single act is one of the most central assaults you can make on the system of a democracy. Now, obviously, the United States is far from being a healthy democracy right now. It hasn't wholly collapsed into civil war mode, but it is crawling there, step by step. And you have just seen a significant major milestone in that unhappy progress. Largely, the establishment politicians still do what they should do in that situation. They all condemned the violence, said it was wholly unacceptable. Most of them refrained from tacking onto that statement any additional point scoring or attribution of blame. And you got statements like this one, a joint statement from the Connecticut Young Republicans and the Young Democrats of Connecticut, expressing the basic sentiment as it should be. Unacceptable, reject all forms of political violence. Unfortunately, the polarization of America has reached such a degree that you have two large groups of people who don't see themselves intersecting with each other in any way whatsoever, and the internet, in its current manifestation, is sadly a highly efficient machine for hunting out the posts of the most extreme people on the other side and parading them endlessly as though they represented everyone on that side. So extremely online MAGA people have been wallowing in outrage and disgust from TikTok videos and similar of certain leftist non-entities celebrating the attack. And extremely online leftists have been viewing all the MAGA supporters who have leapt to conclusions, are blaming all Democrats for the action of this lone gunman, and some of whom are calling for retribution of varying degrees of horribleness. And this is part of a downward spiral that creates and normalizes political violence, because dehumanizing the other side is the prerequisite to making violence against them respectable, even praiseworthy. And when you have a country on a downward spiral, it continues to decline because large numbers of people respond in the obvious ways to the stimuli in front of their eyes. They see viscerally the actions taken against their group, and they're blind to, or simply don't get exposed to, the actions that have been done the same to the other group. Hence you have lots of MAGA people who seem genuinely not to know that the most recent political violence before this was the murder of 2 Democrats and injuring of 2 others. In their mind, it is always the left that carries out attacks. And even though this shooter hasn't yet been found at the time of shooting this video and hasn't been publicly identified, although there is now an image, blurry as it is, of the shooter, they know in their hearts that it's a mad leftist and he was operating according to a plan approved of by all Democrats. Sure, objectively that's an unhinged take, but the decline into political violence is not strategic, it is not rational. Unfortunately, because we do have a democratic norm-breaking political establishment in America, a significant number of senior people of note on the MAGA side were not restrained, not following the formula. President Trump, after what was a conventional speech mourning and celebrating Kirk, who he had personally been a friend of, could not help but blame the killing on, quote, radical leftists. An equation which encourages retribution against an extremely wide group of people, especially if you consider that for a number of MAGA supporters, anyone who disagrees with Trump is by definition such a type. Elon Musk posted to his millions of followers that the Democratic Party was the murder party. Various others did similarly, some responding with fury to the conventional expressions of shock and condemnation from figures such as Barack Obama, screaming at them that this was all their doing, in ways usually left unspecified. It is a common claim from MAGA that their opponents encourage violence by calling Trump an authoritarian or a Nazi. Meanwhile, of course, their own rhetoric, targeted at the other side, continues to be equally visceral, as though such an argument only ever applies to the other side. All of that is now the inevitable feature every single time one of these events happens. The downward spiral that we're on. You can talk about how the process has been accelerated by authoritarianism in the White House, but ultimately it spirals downwards because everyone reacts to the signals in front of them. That leads them into choices that continue the breakdown without necessarily meaning to do that. There is something specific and different about this event, though. Two things, actually. The first is that usually, when we've seen this sort of violence in recent years, it has been the result of inept loners. They usually fail, or they fall short at least of the worst that could have happened, because they lack the skill to exercise violence. They fumble, they make mistakes, give themselves away. The guy who took a shot at Trump missed, only just, but nevertheless he missed, and shot multiple times in an attempt to get it done, hitting someone in the audience in the process. And of course he was quickly dispatched. Others who have managed to hit at their targets in some way often did so because they were targeting people with a lower public profile and hence a less professional cocoon of security around them, such that even a determined amateur could get lucky. Some, of course, did not get lucky. They got intercepted before they got close. In this case, either the shooter got incredibly lucky, which is possible, or he was considerably more skilled in the use of violence, which so far seems to be more likely. Now that's new, but it's something you would expect as you go deeper into the abyss. Some are speculating that he must have been a professional hitman. It's possible, but it doesn't have to have been the case. If you have a system or a culture that starts prizing the use of violence against the other tribe, that starts selecting influencers, hero figures, leaders from people who are more capable in the use of violence, then you get more people upskilling accordingly. Ironically, this is why Trump is so hapless in the face of Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping. Trump is bringing in an authoritarian approach to governance, which, when well embedded, will start to select for those most willing and able to use power with a degree of ruthlessness. If he didn't have obsolescence built in because of his age and his term limits, that system would destroy him eventually, because he's not that competent in that way. Putin and Xi emerged exactly through such a system. They are in their positions because they have proven themselves to be the most skilled, for now, in operating accordingly. Trump really has no clue, and he has had the instinct to exploit institutional weakness when he tripped over it, and he has a political genius for campaigning and a willingness to break the system, both of which made him useful. He has only been effective in building his autocratic platform in his second term because he is now surrounded by people who are more capable than him in the actions needed to make it happen, and he is largely allowing them to direct those actions. So, skill in violence was the first difference with this event. The second was that this was a very high-profile national figure, strongly loved by one side, very uncompromising opponent of the other side. So the impact is greater, the divisive power of the event likewise. Now, of course, that would have applied if Trump had been hit. But of course he wasn't, and it probably would have applied if Josh Shapiro had been killed in the arson attack on his home. But he wasn't. But now we do have such a moment. The question is, what happens next? Authoritarian regimes have often in history used an event like this as the excuse to engage in a crackdown that helps to consolidate their power. Various of the voices online were indeed calling for exactly that. But those voices do not necessarily represent those whose decision it is. Again, the internet sticks those people in front of you. You can control how you respond to them without necessarily following the intuitively obvious outrage. But it's entirely possible such sentiments will feed through into action, because when Trump was talking about the assassination of Charlie Kirk, and he'd said the good part, he concluded by saying that he would, quote, find each and every one of those who contributed to this atrocity and to other political violence, including the organisations that fund it and support it. Bearing in mind, as he made clear in that speech, in Trump's telling, political violence only happens one way, only propagated by radical leftists. Bearing in mind as well, the attack by carjackers on the Doge worker, codenamed Big Balls, was used as justification for sending the National Guard into Washington, D.C., and that event was nothing compared to this. Events like this can be a wake-up call. They can shock people out of a destructive habit to see clearly suddenly what they're doing to themselves. Going after all who contribute to political violence would be a highly worthwhile project that could result from such a shock of realization. But once you filter it through the way that Trump sees the world, how he talks about the political landscape, sounds very much like something that could turn into a much more sinister project. In some ways it doesn't matter, it just makes a difference to the speed of travel. On a purely organic basis, fed by division, with social media optimizing for outrage and hatred, the United States is seeing more and more such violence. Each event is seeding the next one. Everyone is keeping score. Everyone is building up grievances, ignoring the similar transgressions against the other side, building the powder keg higher and higher without any apparent insight as to where that might lead you. Every time this happens, America has the opportunity to be shocked awake, to pull back from the abyss. Every time so far, it has stepped boldly forward and primed itself for the next step.